Factor Fiction Jinx. The Bengals will miss the playoffs for the 19th time in their franchise history after starting 0-2.
I think this is a fact, and for a couple reasons. Number one is, I said this before the year, that the Bengals were due for some regression. They played over their heads for much of the playoffs. Full credit for what they did. But number two is, Joe Burrow has been sacked 13 times in 2 games. 13 times in 2 games, and they play in such a difficult division. Cincinnati did all of this movement during the offseason to solidify the guys in front of Joe Burrow, and it hasn't worked. And history tells you the story here. So I would love to believe in the Bengals. They are a great story, but Joey B hasn't been the same quarterback, and it's because he hasn't been given any time at all. Maybe this line needs time to come together, but there's no way we should be in the same situation. The Bengals should be in the same situation that they were last year at this point, where Joe Burrow is spending more time on his back than he is in the pocket throwing touchdown passes. So I'm going to say this is a fact.
I'll go fact too, but with the caveat saying, I don't think the Bengals are necessarily cooked. I do think we see some kind of resurgence from that offense. They have too many good pieces on that offense to be this bad for the entirety of the season. And last year, they had a trash offensive line too, and Joe Burrow managed to make things work. But the thing is, the question is, are the Bengals going to make the playoffs? And Bill, it was you that brought to our attention this incredible stat that teams that start the season 0-2 since, 1990, have an 11% chance of making the playoffs. I think that is the nail in the coffin, because in the NFL, wins are so hard to come by that when you start the season 0-2, it's just too big of a hole to dig yourself out of. And especially because the division they play in, it's not an easy one, the black and blue division, like Jinx said. So I think this is less of me saying that, oh, the Bengals are going to be terrible, Joe Burrow is going to look like absolute garbage for the entire year, and more of the hole that they are in right now is just too difficult to climb out of. They need a life alert because they've fallen and they can't get up.
Yeah, I'll make it 3 for 3. I think this is probably going to be a fact. I think they'll probably beat the Jets this week. Then you look at their schedule coming up after that. They have the Dolphins at home, and we just talked about Tua and what they're doing. Then at the Ravens and at the Saints, 2 teams that can really, really get after the quarterback. And the offensive line has already said, if we can't get Joe Burrow to trust us, it's going to be a long season. So when their players are already saying it could be a long season for them, then I worry about what's going to happen in Cincinnati. All right, fact or fiction number 2. The Colts were shut out in Jacksonville on Sunday, 24-0. Amazingly enough, the 3rd time in the last 6 years Indy has been held scoreless in Jacksonville. That is a wild stat. Colts have scored just 20 points this year. They have the 2nd worst point differential in the NFL at -24. And oh yeah, it gets easy this week. They got Kansas City coming in, and then they go to the Titans and a road game against Denver. Fact or fiction, Chelsa, it is over for the Colts.
Well, I would be dancing on the Colts' grave if I could. But the thing is, the AFC South is so terrible this season that the Colts still have a fighting chance. Look across the league. The Titans had one of the worst games that I've seen in a long time against the Bills. And yes, it was a game that they weren't really supposed to win, but that game against the Giants, they were supposed to win. So just by a matter of fact, saying and seeing how bad the AFC South is this year, I think the Jags are probably the favorite to win the division. Maybe not on the odds board, but as far as the eye test goes, the Jags have looked the best of any team in that division. So I don't think the Colts are dead in that regard. But this whole Matt Ryan is the savior of the franchise and he's a huge upgrade over Carson Wentz, can we already call that an old takes exposed? Because I think that we have seen that run its course. And maybe Matt Ryan has something in store for us, later on the season. Because I will say, we are only 2 games into the season. There's plenty of time for us to be proven wrong in that regard. But no, I don't think the Colts are cooked just because the AFC South is so bad.
I think it's a fact. I was way off about Matt Ryan. He looks like he needs to be throwing around a few passes in the backyard with a copper fit on. My God, he has not looked good. Now, to his credit, he didn't have Michael Pittman last week. That's his primary receiver. The Colts also didn't have Shaq Leonard last week, their best linebacker, so they're not exactly at full strength. That said, their performance against Jacksonville was inexcusable. I don't know what it is about the Colts and the Jack. Indy just cannot beat Jacksonville, but the Colts are going to drop to 0-3. And We know how hard it is to make the playoffs when you're 0-2. Now you're going to be 0-3. So is it over for the Colts as far
They have a
as
tie, don't they?
Did they have a tie? Oh, they do have a
Yes.
tie. So they're okay. So they have a
1-1.
tie.
Yeah.
So I don't. God, I would forget about that's even worse actually. That they have a tie. They would have a tie. I do think it's over. I don't see them making the playoffs. Maybe they surprise us this weekend against Kansas City. Is it over in the sense that, hey, they can make a run and recover and make this a decent season? No. Is it over in them maybe recovering and making the playoffs? Yeah, I think it's a fact.
Yeah, I don't think obviously with the tie, they're not going to start out 0-4, but are we going to be shocked if they're 0-3-1 or 0-4-1 with that schedule they got coming up? I think Kansas City is going to take care of them this week. And then the Titans, I still like they're going to be able to run the ball. The Colts defense, to me, even more disappointing than not scoring against Jacksonville, was their defense couldn't get off the field at key points against the Jaguars, which is inexcusable for a team that's supposed to be one of the contenders in the AFC. So unfortunately, and I know there's a couple of us that were really high on the Colts in the AFC this year, I think it may be a done deal for them. They may not be able to recover from this early season hole they're going to dig themselves into. All right, number 3, the Steelers are a blocked extra point away from being 0-2 on the season. They managed just 243 total yards in their loss to New England, averaging barely 4 yards a play. The fans in Pittsburgh were chanting for Kenny Pickett to replace Mitch Trubisky at quarterback. Jenks, fact or fiction, Pickett should be the starter, and the fans are right.
I guess I'll say fact, just because the Steelers have nothing to lose. But you know how it is. The most popular player on the team is always the backup quarterback, particularly when you play in Pittsburgh and you went to Pitt and you're backing up Mitch Trubisky, and no one expected him to light the world on fire this season. So sure, yeah, give him a shot. But the idea that the fans are correct and this is the right move, I don't know if I believe that. But if he is the quarterback of the future for Pittsburgh and they drafted him to be that, you would think, then why not give him a shot now, see what he can do?
Yeah, when have the fans ever been wrong, right? They certainly were right
Never.
on Tua Tagovailoa, right? No, they were dead wrong because Tua looked amazing. So, no, I think you get in dangerous territory when you start listening to the fans, because we've seen this before. Anytime you have a backup quarterback, immediately he becomes like the prettiest girl in the room when your quarterback doesn't look amazing. I will say one thing. The Steelers are 1-1. Who cares if it's a blocked extra point? It still counts as a win. So maybe this team has a chance of contending and making the playoffs, and maybe that is your urgency factor here. But still, I'm not ready to throw away Mitch Trubisky just yet. Like, I am not a believer in Mitch Trubisky. I personally do not like him because he went to UNC and I went to NC State. But still, let's not start listening to the fans. Mike Tomlin deserves some credit here. He's never had a losing season in Pittsburgh, so maybe let him make the decisions here.
Yeah, I'm going to go with you on that one as well, Chelsea. If you look at their schedule coming up, the Steelers on the road against the Browns this week. So that, unfortunately, I think for them is going to be a loss. And then the fans are going to yell even more. So, okay, maybe you start him against the Jets the following week at home as far as, letting Kenny Pickett get his first start. Then his next 2 games would be at the Bills and against Tampa Bay. Yikes. Not exactly the start that you would want for a rookie quarterback to have to go to Buffalo and then take on Tampa Bay. So maybe you let Mitch Trubisky get to the point where they're, out of it. Maybe they're 2-6, 3-6, whatever it is. And then you let him, start after they've had to play at Buffalo and against Tampa Bay. Just my opinion, but I'm with you, Chelsea. Give Mike Tomlin some credit. The guy's never had a losing season. I think he knows what he's doing.
For sure. It's Mike Tomlin. I get it.
All right, real quick, let's get this last one in. Philadelphia cruised past Minnesota on Monday night and are now off to a 2-0 start. They have now moved past the Packers as the second favorite to win the NFC. Fact or fiction, Chelsea, the Eagles should be the favorites in the NFC.
I'm trying not to overreact to that win last night, but look across the NFC. Nobody's looking that good right now. The Rams have looked very mediocre. The Packers have looked mediocre. Tom Brady's throwing tablets, so maybe. I'll go fact here.
No, this is fiction. I'm not immediately on board with the Eagles being the favorites in the NFC just because they beat Kirk Cousins in prime time. Ask yourself a very simple question. In a big game, a playoff scenario, you trusting Jalen Hurts or Tom Brady? I'm going with Tom Brady. Jalen Hurts looked awesome last night. The Eagles are up and coming. They've done an awesome job, but this is fiction. It's still the Bucs. Come on. Come on.
Eagles are going to be 5-0 when Dallas comes to town in 4 weeks. They are going to end up being either the 1 or 2 seed in the NFC. Mark it down.
Ooh. All in on the Eagles. Coming up next, week